the sky is gray. I've been for a walk on a winter's day. If I didn't tell her I could leave today, California dreaming on a winter's day, on such a winter's day.
She's got a smile that it seems to me reminds me of childhood memories, where everything was as fresh as a bright blue sky. Now and then when I see her face, she takes me away to that special place. And if I stare too long, I'd probably break down and cry. Child of mine, whoa, oh, 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 sweet love of mine. She's got eyes of the bluest skies, as if they thought of rain. I'd hate to look into those eyes and see an ounce of pain. Her hair reminds me of a warm, safe place where as a child I'd hide and pray for the thunder and the rain to quietly pass me by. Whoa, 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 sweet child of mine. Whoa, oh, 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 sweet love of mine. Whoa, whoa, sweet child of mine. Whoa, oh, oh, sweet love of mine. Child of mine. Whoa, oh, 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 sweet love of mine. Whoa, oh, sweet child of mine. Whoa, oh, oh, sweet love of mine. Whoa, child of mine. Whoa, oh, 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 sweet love of mine. Whoa, oh, sweet child of mine. Whoa, oh, 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 sweet love of mine.
I'm gonna make a change for once in my life. It's gonna feel real good, gonna make a difference, gonna make it right. as I turn up the color on my favorite winter coat. The wind is blowing my mind. I see the kids in the street with no enough sweets. Who am I to be blind, pretending not to see their needs? A summer disregard, a broken bottle top, and a once man's soul. They follow each other on the wind, you know, 'cause they got nowhere to go. That's why I want you to know I'm starting with a man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways, and no message could have been any clearer. If you wanna make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. Been a victim of a selfish kind of love. It's time that I realize that there's some with no home and unable to loan. Could it be really me pretending that they're not alone? I will look deeply scarred by somebody's broken heart and a washed out dream. They follow the pattern of the wind, you see, 'cause they got no place to be. That's why I'm starting with me. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways, and no message could have been any clearer. If you wanna make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways, and no message could have been any clearer. If you wanna make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm starting with the man in the mirror.
Un pas, une pierre, un chemin qui chemine, un reste de racines. C'est un peu solitaire, c'est un éclat de verre, c'est la vie, le soleil, c'est la mort, le sommeil. C'est un piège entrouvert, un arbre millénaire, un nœud dans le bois. C'est un chien qui aboie, c'est un oiseau dans l'air, c'est un tronc qui pourrit, c'est la neige qui fond. Le mystère profond, la promesse de vie. C'est le souffle du vent au sommet des collines. C'est une vieille ruine, le vide, le néant. C'est la pie qui jacasse, c'est l'averse qui verse des torrents d'allégresse. Ce sont les eaux de Mars. C'est le pied qui avance, à pas sûr, à pas lent. C'est la main qui se tend, c'est la pierre qu'on lance. C'est un trou dans la terre, un chemin qui chemine, un reste de racines. C'est un peu solitaire, c'est un oiseau dans l'air, un oiseau qui se pose, le jardin qu'on arrose, une source d'eau claire, une écharde, un clou. C'est la fièvre qui monte, c'est un compte à bon compte, c'est un peu rien du tout. Un poisson à un geste, c'est comme du fif-argent. C'est tout ce qu'on attend, c'est tout ce qui nous reste. C'est du bois, c'est un jour, le bout du quai, un alcool trafiqué, le chemin le plus court. C'est les cris d'un hibou, encore ensommeillé, la voiture rouillée. C'est la bouche, c'est la bourre, un pas, un pont, un crapaud qui croasse. C'est un chaland qui passe, c'est un bel horizon. C'est la saison des pluies, c'est la fonte des glaces. Ce sont les eaux de Mars, la promesse de vie. c'est Jacques, un sapin qui attaque, une entaille au talon, un pas, une pierre, chemin qui chemine, un reste de racine, c'est un peu solitaire, un point, une bosse, une tache, un goût, un geste, une aiguille, une guêpe, un coup. L'hiver qui s'efface, fin d'une saison, c'est la neige qui fond, ce sont les eaux de Mars, la promesse de vie, le mystère profond, ce sont les eaux de Mars, dans ton cœur tu te fonds. Un pas, une pierre, un chemin qui chemine, un reste de racine, c'est un peu solitaire, c'est l'hiver qui s'efface, la fin d'une saison, c'est la neige qui fond, ce sont les eaux de Mars, la promesse de vie, le mystère profond, ce sont les eaux de Mars, dans ton cœur tu te fonds. Spirit incomplete, I've been had. I was sad and blue, but you made me feel. Yeah, you made me feel shiny and new, like a virgin. Touch for the very first time, like a virgin. When your heart beats next to mine, gonna give you all my love, boy. My fear is fading fast. Been saving it all for you, 'cause only love can last. You're so fine, and you're mine. Make me strong, yeah, you make me bold. Oh, your love thought out, yeah, your love thought out what was getting cold. Like a virgin, touched for the very first time, like a virgin, with your heartbeat next to mine. Oh, 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 oh. You're so fine, and you're mine. I'll be yours till the end of time, 'cause you made me feel. Yeah, you made me feel nothing to hide, like a virgin. Touch for the very first time, like a virgin. When your heart beats next to mine, like a virgin. Ooh, like a virgin. Feels so good inside when you hold me and your
That's all they really want. Some fun when the working day is done. Oh, girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun. Some boys take a beautiful girl and hide her away from the rest of the world. I wanna be the one to walk in the sun, but girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun. That's all they really want. Some fun when the working day is done. Oh, girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun. They just wanna, 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 they just wanna. Girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. And if you could please return to your seats at the earliest opportunity, we'll be able to get on with the main business of this evening. That's very sonorous. Don't make me do my schoolteacher face. Please return to your seats. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to the 6th Annual Magnitsky Awards, an event which I think is perhaps best described as a testament to the values, the ideals and the principles embodied by one man's death and another man's life. The first man, of course, is Sergei Magnitsky, who died 12 years ago this week. Tuesday, in fact, marked the anniversary. And he passed after spending 358 days in Butrika prison in Moscow. And as I say those words, I realize that if you're going to mispronounce a Russian word, this is not the room to do it in. Sergei stood for integrity, for investigation, and most of all, I think he stood for something that the other man we celebrate this evening has dedicated the rest of his life to safeguarding. And that word is truth. There's a line in Orwell in 1984 about hanging on to the truth being the most important thing of all. If you can hang on to the truth, he wrote, even if you are the only one, you will not go mad. And there are times, looking at modern politics, where madness seems perhaps the most accurate description of what is unfolding in front of us. But if you can hang on to the truth, you will not go mad. And in their 6 years of existence, I think the Magnitsky Awards have come to represent truth in a way that all of us can sometimes benefit from being reminded of. I'd like to begin, if I may, by telling you how I came to know Bill Browder. I present a radio show on a station called LBC. It's a phone-in show. When you present a radio phone-in show, people often think that the hardest part of the job is making the phones ring. That's actually the easiest bit. Don't tell anybody I told you this. But if you want to make the phones ring on a radio show, there are two questions that are guaranteed to set the switchboard on fire. The first is this: is there anybody old out there feeling poorly? Phones will go mad. The second is, has anybody ever received a parking ticket that they felt was really unfair? Occasionally, one aims a little bit higher. And it was in 2014 that I tried to do a phone-in about the burgeoning crisis in Ukraine, the crisis that would, of course, culminate in the ejection of Yanukovych and what became the Maidan Revolution. And it went all right. I won't lie to you, it didn't get anything like the number of calls that the parking ticket phone-ins get. But I was quietly pleased with the way it had gone. And when I came off air that afternoon, my producer said to me, there's been a bloke on the phone. He listened to the phone-in and he wants to meet you and explain some very important matters to you. Now, this happens quite often when you present a radio program. And it's fair to say it's very rarely rewarding to actually meet with the people who've asked to meet with you to explain very important matters that you're currently unaware of. These days, it involves people who think that the coronavirus vaccine has been designed by Bill Gates to inject tiny little microchips into all our bloodstream so that he can control our thought processes. Back in the day, there was a lady who kept the cure for cancer in her fridge and was desperate for me to help her bring this to a wider audience because she was worried that it might go off. But on this occasion, it was well worth my while meeting the gentleman who sought to explain some rather complicated truths to me, because that man was Bill Browder. And what he explained to me that day has possibly become more and more pertinent and more evidently true with every day that has since passed. So it's always been a particular privilege for me to present the Magnitsky Awards. And without wanting to put any pressure at all upon the 6 winners this evening, I should tell you that the last time I stood on this stage, one of the laureates has subsequently gone on to win the Nobel Peace Prize. I speak, of course, of Maria Ressa, the Filipino journalist who's and, of course, the wheels keep turning. Announced today that there will be a proper public inquiry into the death of Dawn Sturgis in Salisbury, a victim of an attack intended, of course, to kill Sergei Skripal. And on we go. And that is why not only does Bill Browder's work keeping Sergei Magnitsky's memory alive, but also now recognizing people from all corners of the world who are committed to similar principles, similar ideals, similar belief in truth. So with no further ado, we'll crack on with the business of handing out this year's awards. I'm going to tell you that Sabrina has very kindly supplied me with fairly exhaustive biographies of all of the people who will be joining me on stage to hand out the awards. I'm going to take a bit of a risk, and I'm just going to pick 2 paragraphs at random from each biography, if I may. Otherwise, we'd be here all night. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage this evening our presenter of the outstanding contribution, the global Magnitsky justice movement, Mr. William Browder, who, as many of you will know, rebelled against his grandfather, who was the founder of the Communist Party. I'm allowed to tell people this, aren't I, Bill? That's all right? Yeah, okay. So the founder of the Communist Party in America, and young William decided to rebel against that by becoming the largest foreign investor in Russia until about 2005, when he was, of course, denied entry to the country and declared a threat to national security for exposing corruption in Russian state-owned companies. Since then, as you know, Bill has sought justice outside of Russia and started a global campaign for governments around the world to impose targeted visa bans and asset freezes on human rights abusers and highly corrupt officials. The United States was the first to impose these targeted sanctions with the passage of the Sergei Magnitsky Accountability Act in 2012, followed by the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act 4 years later. Since then, Canada, the United Kingdom, the Baltic states, the European Union, and most recently, Australia have passed their own versions of the Magnitsky Act. And I extend a particular welcome to many of the politicians from many of those countries who have A bit of a timely confusion there between companies and countries in this country, who have been able to join us here this evening. Bill Browder is currently working to have similar legislation passed in other countries worldwide, including New Zealand and Japan, to name just a few. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Bill Browder.
Thank you, James. It's always good to have you here. So 12 years ago, 12 years and 2 days ago, I should say, Sergei Magnitsky was murdered in a Russian prison after spending 358 days in detention, and after the authorities tried to torture him into retracting his testimony about police corruption and the theft of $230 million. And I've been on a mission since his murder to get justice for him. And as James said, one of the key tools that we ended up coming up with was the Magnitsky Act. And the idea was, if we could freeze the assets and ban the travel, ban the visas of the people who killed Sergei and kill other people like that, it won't be true justice, but it'd be a lot better than total impunity. And I started on this project in 2010, and nobody thought it would ever succeed. Everybody thought that the Russian government was so powerful and that no individual could change a situation like this. And because of the power of Sergei's story, it overcame the cynicism of politics. And the United States passed the first Magnitsky Act in 2012. Russian President Vladimir Putin got so upset he made it his single largest foreign policy priority to repeal the Magnitsky Act, and he banned the adoption of Russian orphans in retaliation. And the senators who passed the Magnitsky Act said, well, if Putin got so mad, maybe there's other dictators that deserve this too. And that became the genesis of the Global Magnitsky Act, which passed in 2016, which sanctions bad guys from around the world. After that, we went to Canada, the UK, the European Union, and we're now in a situation where there are 33 countries that have Magnitsky Acts. And in order to do this, I can't do it by myself. I always have to find friends, allies, collaborators around the world. And there are many people here tonight who are those friends, allies, and collaborators. But tonight, I want to focus my praise and attention on one specific friend, ally, and collaborator, and that's Senator Kimberly Kitching from Australia. Senator Kitching is someone who I met on Zoom. I was supposed to, there was never an opportunity to go to Australia to visit, and we met on Zoom, and I actually think that Zoom is about, I don't know, like 40% as effective as meeting in real life, but somehow Kimberly was so enthralled by this idea that it didn't take any great persuasion on my part in order to get her activated. And Australia is a country that's really completely on the other side of the world, and for years I've been trying to get things going, and I couldn't get any traction at all. And the moment I met Kimberly on Zoom, everything started to happen. And over the course of lockdown, she organized a parliamentary inquiry into the Magnitsky Act. She got all sorts of members of parliament, members of the Senate from Australia signed up to the Magnitsky Act. She got the parliamentary inquiry on a multi-party basis to recommend the Magnitsky Act to the government. And And then finally, she got the government to agree to do a Magnitsky Act. And there's one small detail I want to correct, which is it hasn't yet passed, but I understand that it will pass in the next 2 weeks. And Australia will be the 34th country. Australia would be the 34th country in the world that has a Magnitsky Act. And my whole thing is to go and get the Magnitsky Act in all countries that bad guys want to keep their money in. And we're starting to run out of those countries where we almost have the whole world covered. And so it really is a great honor, a great pleasure to recognize Kimberly Kitching with the Magnitsky Award for 2021. Kimberly, please come up and accept your award.
Firstly, thank you, and it is an honour to be here in this room with every one of you. I'd like to thank Bill, not only for his generosity, not only for this award and for this awards ceremony, but also for all that he has done to make the world a better place, for understanding what the world could be and for understanding what the world should be. Also, he has shown himself to be a defender of all humanity through the deep care he has shown to Sergei Magnitsky and his memory. As he said this afternoon at the Henry Jackson Society, it means Sergei Magnitsky's death is not meaningless. As Bill knows, and I have witnessed a tight group of good people whom he has around him, it is not possible to do this alone, as you've just said, Bill. So I would like to acknowledge the amazing people I have met over the last few days, and I would like to acknowledge the following people. Michael Danby, my friend who is retired from Australian federal politics now, and who is known to some of you, and is a force of nature, and was the first person I spoke with about Magnitsky legislation after seeing Bill Browder being interviewed on the ABC in Australia. Most of Michael's family were murdered in the Holocaust, and he said to me once when he was being outspoken on an issue, and probably in trouble, knowing Michael, "How can someone like me not speak for the oppressed? If people like me don't fight, then who am I? What am I doing in Parliament?" I think these are very wise words and words I carry with me. I'd like to thank my own party for adopting support for Magnitsky legislation, and we've never given up on having this law. It's been delightful to find allies across the aisle and in the crossbench. I'd like to thank Maurice Payne, the Australian Foreign Minister, who sent a reference on Magnitsky to the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade for it to inquire into Australia's need for Magnitsky legislation, and her office, especially her Chief of Staff, for all of their work. I'd like to thank my fellow Wolverines, and there is a story behind that name, but I would like to thank them, especially Andrew Hastie, who is now an Assistant Minister for Defence and the member for Canning, and my fellow Victorian Senator James Paterson. James and I wrote an opinion piece in the Australian newspaper together, and this has been a bipartisan effort ever since. I'd also like to acknowledge my IPAC co-chairs who are in the room. IPAC is the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, and there is no surprise there is overlap between IPAC and the people in this room for Magnitsky. I'd also like to acknowledge the very able Secretariat led by Luke de Pulford. I think all of these people, all of you in this room, you understand the need for Magnitsky legislation and why we cannot let the dregs of humanity, those who steal from their compatriots, who torture and murder, who delight in causing fear, who place their citizens in concentration camps, who enforce slavery and arbitrary detention, all of these people in the Australian Parliament whom I've mentioned, and all of the people in this room understand why we as human beings who believe in the dignity of human beings cannot allow such evil to go on, unchallenged. And all of the people who understand why Magnitsky legislation is necessary understand why democracies must be supreme. President Kennedy said in his inaugural address that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. He was, of course, when he said these words, referring to the Soviet Union. Le plus ça change. I'm not saying that democracies are always right. After all, it was 2 years after that inaugural address, and it was from his jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama, that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote these words that should still ring in our ears, and they certainly ring in mine very often. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. But it is the democracies where there is sunlight and transparency, that have a rule of law, that respect the rights of minorities, that believe in free and fair elections, that believe in the freedom of the press, that believe in human rights. It is they that are the promised land for those who suffer at the mean and ugly and choking hands of authoritarian regimes. Democracies need to grow, not to contract. And for those of us in this room who do not hold out an appeasing hand to those who commit human rights abuses, who do not hold out a grasping hand to those who engage in large-scale corruption, to those who tell these evil people, no, we will not look away while you do wrong, but rather look them straight in the eye and say, we shall make pariahs of you all. For those in this room who choose to fight as Bill has chosen to fight, for those who will fight for justice and righteousness, you have made the only choice there is to make. I'm so grateful there are people like Bill Browder in the world, and that had me thinking. So I am going to nominate Bill for the Nobel Peace Prize. As a member of a National Assembly or a national parliament, I am able to do so. I'm going to encourage, possibly hound, my fellow legislators to nominate Bill as well, and the people in this room who are eligible to nominate him as well. We'll have a campaign. This will bring more attention to Sergei Magnitsky and his death as well. It will mean, as Bill hopes, that his death is not meaningless. We'll start now. Thank you once again. It is an honour to be with every one of you in this room. Thank you.
I can't believe Bill fact-checked me live on stage. At least he didn't accuse me of fake news. Interesting also to hear Kimberly mention that her colleague had first seen Bill Browder on ABC News in Australia. I think we can all agree that it's possible that at some point, wherever you are in the world, Bill will be giving an interview to somebody about the importance of keeping Sergei Magnitsky's memory alive. I accidentally tuned into a new British channel called GB News the other day and saw him being interviewed by Nigel Farage, which I think we can all agree is a commitment to the cause way, way beyond the call of duty. We turn our attention next to a particularly timely award, I think it's fair to say. And without issuing any spoilers, we are very, very lucky to have the recipient of this award with us here tonight. I will say no more. I will introduce Monique Wheeler to present the award for Courage Under Fire. Monique is a global leader in the charity world, an esteemed journalist and a specialist in press freedom, the author of Slaves Among Us. She has created Trust Law, Trust Conference, and the Stop Slavery Award. She's been ranked among the world's 100 most influential people in business ethics by Ethisphere since 2014, and was fourth in the UK's 2018 Top 100 Corporate Modern Slavery Influencers Index. Villa received the Champions for Change Award in 2015 for her vision and effort in the fight against human trafficking and modern slavery, and was the recipient of ECPAT USA's inaugural Freedom Award in 2017 in recognition of her leadership in the fight to end child trafficking. I should add that picking 2 paragraphs from this biography, Monique, was probably the hardest challenge of the evening. And now, please welcome to the stage to present this year's Magnitsky Award for Courage Under Fire, Monique Wieler.
Thank you so much, and especially thank you to Bill for asking me to give the Magnitsky Award for Courage Under Fire. This is an honor. I'm especially been honored for me because the award for Courage Under Fire celebrates this year someone I know well and love dearly, Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe. She has more courage than most people I know. And she has been incredibly strong since she was arrested and taken hostage in spite of the torture and the suffering that she endured these last 5 years and a half. Let me say here that courage is a quality that she shares fully with her husband, Richard Ratcliffe. He is also a remarkable human being and, of course, a dream husband. Nazanin is a colleague of mine. She worked for 5 years at the Thomson Reuters Foundation before being taken hostage so many years ago. She has guts, a lot. She has integrity, a lot. And she demonstrated her courage all these last years by keeping her head high, and most of all, by keeping her sanity in the worst of situations. These qualities, I could appreciate them at the foundation, where she was project manager. Her drive and ambition in progress were obvious. She knew how to make herself respected by everyone, including by her direct boss, and this at the risk of ruffling feathers. This is when I discovered the real Nazanin under the beautiful and charming woman. Let me insist that she is a project manager on the media development team of the foundation and has never trained journalists, as Boris Johnson said when he was Foreign Secretary 4 years ago. It was a terrible gaffe that subjected her to more abuse and torture in Iran. Nazanin has spent more than 8 months in total isolation, permanently under the scrutiny and the eyes of a camera. That is real torture. Moral and physical torture in a minuscule cell with the guards in her back when they were interrogating her. This leaves scars. And indeed, since this time in isolation, I think Nazanin suffers from severe PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder that is long to cure and that many survivors of extreme violence, like human trafficking, know well. And I know many of these survivors of modern slavery. Even now, where Nazanin lives in her parents' place in Tehran, she's still not free because of the 1-year new sentence that is above her head and could send her back to jail at any time. A permanent threat that keeps you on tenterhooks, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. I've never heard her complain, although she is now separated from her daughter, the adorable Gabriella, who used to visit her every week in jail. But Gabriella came to London 2 years ago to live with her father. Nazanin wanted her to have a British education, but how her absence weighs on her. All this to say that the inaction of Boris Johnson government in confronting Nazanin's situation is appalling. They know that to free Nazanin and the other British Iranian hostages, they have to pay the debt of £400 million they have with Tehran for an old arms deal that was signed at the time of the Shah. Even one of the successors of Boris Johnson at the Foreign Office, the Tory MP Jeremy Hunt, has urged the government to pay this debt. Jeremy Hunt was the one who granted Nazanin the exceptional status of diplomatic protection after a successful campaign by redress, by the way. The debt has never been paid. Nazanin is hostage in Tehran. Nothing has moved. The Magnitsky Award will put a ray of light in her restricted life. She is a 42-year-old woman living with her parents, far from Richard, far from Gabriella. I'm going to hand over this award for Courage Under Fire to Nazanin's daughter, Gabriella Radcliffe.
We might need the chair. Do you want the chair? Okay, bear with us here. Should you try and stand on the chair? James, wait a minute. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Monique. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone who's here. This is it's a really happy day. Two things from me before Gabriella's going to read out a little note that Nazanin sent. Two things from me, though. I just wanted to say, firstly, a big thank you to everyone involved in this award, to everyone involved in, I mean, really, as Monique said, a ray of sunshine for us. It was a genuine joy to tell Nazanin that she'd won the award. It was a genuine joy for her to go out with some of the families of her cellmates and celebrate it with her lawyer and just have that moment that actually the world outside sees, the world outside cares, the world outside is with you. There's nothing like not knowing or knowing you're not alone. So thank you to all of you for your role in that and for all that you do. The other thing I'd want to say, and this is directed at Bill and everyone involved in the Global Magnitsky campaign, it is a profound gift that you give to families like ours in a world where, things can happen that are horrible and states can look the other way. To have a mechanism and a tool that we can push for accountability for the bad guys, as you put it very eloquently, and that we can work with other families. And we've been working on a project with redress and a number of former hostages, current hostage families, talking through who would be the guys we would want to go after. For the empowerment that comes from that, those guys don't get away with it, that together we are stronger, together, individually we're all isolated and put our family members put through terrible things. That is only possible thanks to the legacy of this movement, and I am deeply grateful to all of you here for your role in it. Nazanin has written a few words, which Gabriella is going to try and read out.
Thank you for this award. It means a lot to me and to my cellmates still in Evan prison, that we are not forgotten. It makes my heart melt to see my daughter, now big enough to receive this award, and to read these words. One day, may we live in a world where we do not need to fight for our freedom. But thank you to all of you for walking next to us while we still need to do this fight, and for still reminding us that freedom is one day closer. Thank you all, Nazanin.
Thank you. Good job. Okay.
Richard, you've taken my notes. I need one of them back. While you're sending the sheet of paper with a list of prizes up on the board, could I sign Gabriella? Could you make me a promise? Can I have some public speaking lessons off you, please, when this is over? Thank you. I'm going to add, I hope you don't mind, Richard, that Richard has just spent the best part of 3 weeks on hunger strike outside the Foreign Office. I realise many of our foreign guests this evening will perhaps not be aware of that, and he's far too modest to have mentioned it himself. That's why I said we're lucky to have him and Gabriella here this evening to accept the award. I went to see him while he was on hunger strike, and as we were invited to do, all of the people who went along to show their support, I had my photograph taken with him. And I got back to work the next day, and my producer said, did you go and see Richard? I said, yes. She goes, did you get your photograph taken with him? I said, yes. She goes, well, we must put it up on the website. And I said, no, we can't. We can't put it up on the website. And she said, well, why on earth not? And I said, well, it's all about him. And she goes, no, they want us to put it up on the website. We've spoken to Richard's family, and everybody else that's been to see him. Keir Starmer has been to see him. Angela Rayner has been to see him. Boris Johnson has been nowhere near him. Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, has been nowhere near him. But lots of people have been there to show their support, and they want us to put the photographs up on the website and put them on Twitter and get them around the world as comprehensively as we can. I said, I really, really can't put this photograph up on the website. I'll show you why. And I took my phone out and I showed her the photograph, and she looked at my phone. She went, no, you're absolutely right. We can't put this photograph up on the website. Because I have this really bad habit of grinning like a Cheshire cat when my photograph is being taken. So somewhere in the ether, there is a photograph of one of the bravest men I have ever met in the middle of a hunger strike, looking haggard and gaunt and resolute, with a complete idiot standing next to him with a smile on his face like he's just met Elvis Presley. Richard, I'm sorry. Our next guest this evening, our next award this evening is the Magnitsky Award for the Outstanding Lawyer. And to present it, Rupert Skilbeck will be coming shortly to the stage. Rupert is the director of Redress, an international human rights organisation based in London and The Hague that supports victims of torture to bring legal cases to obtain justice and reparation. Redress collaborates with national partners in many different countries and has represented hundreds of survivors all over the world. Previously, Rupert was the litigation director at the Open Society Justice Initiative, where he oversaw their global human rights litigation and litigated the case of Magnitskaya versus Russia at the European Court of Human Rights. In 2006, he was appointed by the United Nations as the principal defender for the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia. Rupert was also the director of the Odsiek Krivichny Odbrani, the criminal defense section of the state court in Sarajevo, and a defense advisor at the Special Court for Sierra Leone. To present this evening's Magnitsky Award for Outstanding Lawyer, ladies and gentlemen, Rupert Skilbeck.
Good evening, everyone. I never had the privilege to meet Sergei Magnitsky, but through preparing his case and reading his detailed letters of complaint, his legal arguments, the records of his appearances in court, I've got to know the kind of advocate that he was. He was an advocate who always did the very best for his clients, with a burning desire for justice. He had a powerful indignation at the injustice that he witnessed. He was creative in how he responded to the situation he faced. He could tell the story of what had happened with clarity and with insight. He had an extraordinary commitment to the task, no matter what happened. He ensured that whatever he did was flawlessly executed, and he showed bravery in the face of threats and physical abuse. A man with almost unbelievable tenacity, who never gave up. Equatorial Guinea is one of the richest countries in Africa, with a high GDP due to the vast amount of oil wealth that has come in since the 1990s. It should be the Saudi Arabia of the continent, but it isn't. Instead, it is fabulously corrupt. The ruling families live lives of astounding luxury in Europe and America. Fast cars, glamorous jewelry, planes, mansions around the world. Their children in the best educational establishments that money can buy. The son of the president, Théodore Obiang, was convicted of the criminal offense of embezzlement in France, with the French authorities seizing more than 150 million euros of houses, luxury properties, and Lamborghini cars. Yet 75% of the citizens of Equatorial Guinea earn less than $2 a day, making it one of the poorest countries in the world. This poverty is entirely due to corruption. To maintain this power and the corruption, the regime relies on arbitrary detention, torture, enforced disappearance, and threats against those who dissent. As the United States government recently put it, through relentless embezzlement and extortion, Vice President Nguema Obiang shamelessly looted his government and shook down businesses in his country to support his lavish lifestyle, while many of his fellow citizens lived in extreme poverty. Civil society in Equatorial Guinea is brutally shut down if it seeks to confront the ruling families. There is no space for the protection of human rights or to challenge corruption. There are no human rights NGOs inside Equatorial Guinea, as it is simply not allowed. In response to this seemingly impossible situation, the recipient of this evening's award, Tutu Alicante, created EG Justice, intending to challenge the status quo and shine a light on the corruption and human rights abuses taking place in that corner of the world. Through his work over many years, he has used the law to expose what the authorities have tried to hide and to obtain justice for the human rights violations that have taken place. In this work, he has led groundbreaking litigation to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, challenging corruption in Equatorial Guinea. He has worked with the US authorities to gather witnesses and evidence to build an astounding asset forfeiture claim against the president's son, which led to the confiscation of a $30 million Malibu mansion, tens of millions of dollars of luxury goods, including sports cars, a plane, and memorably a diamond-encrusted glove belonging to Michael Jackson. He's brought legal claims to the United Nations on behalf of activists who are arbitrarily detained, and he's pressed for an international response to ensure their release. And most recently, he helped build the landmark criminal prosecution of Théodorine Obiang in France in the Bien Malaki case, leading to his conviction for embezzlement and the seizure of those huge amounts of funds. This is the very best of human rights lawyering, uncovering evidence and witnesses, even in very difficult circumstances, to build a case, documenting torture, arbitrary detention, disappearances, and corruption, working collaboratively with a huge range of partner NGOs and activists to build a movement that needs to be there, working with lawyers still based in Equatorial Guinea as far as it is possible, protecting them as part of the process, using the law creatively and his skills of persuasion, using the power of the media to get the message out. This work is dangerous. As in Russia, human rights lawyers and activists in Equatorial Guinea are put under surveillance. They are harassed, they are beaten, and worse. When he first started his legal work, Tutu's family were arrested and detained. For many years, he had to work anonymously, using a pseudonym, hiding his identity to protect his family because of what he did. He then realized that publicity can sometimes be the greatest form of protection, and that the international community can, and in some circumstances, demonstrate their support and make the whole process safer. But the threats are still real. Human rights defenders in Equatorial Guinea are regularly detained in the notorious Black Beach prison and tortured through violent physical assaults. The threats extend to the streets of Europe, where gangs are sent to beat opponents by mysterious people finding them on the streets in the middle of the night. Like Sergei Magnitsky, Tutu Alicante is a lawyer who is prepared to risk everything to challenge corruption and human rights violations. He has made an immense contribution to the cause of human rights and to the anti-corruption community in Equatorial Guinea, in Africa, and around the world. I'm very pleased to present the 2021 Magnitsky Award for Outstanding Lawyer to Tutu Alicante.
Thank you so very much. Thank you to the nomination committee, and thank you, Bill. I don't know if I have the words. I am really, really honored to receive this award named after an exceptional human being, named after a lawyer who, as both of you have mentioned, as Bill has mentioned, really personified, really embodied the meaning of courage, the meaning of integrity, the real meaning of commitment, unwavering commitment to justice. So I am indeed honored. I think it's clear that Sergei's legacy, his life, his work, has already touched hundreds of millions of people. It is the only reason why I, born in an island of about 1,000 people, about 4,000 miles away from Moscow, can stand here today to claim a little bit of that legacy that Sergei has established. Sergei Magnitsky's life clearly makes it present to us that corruption is not, has never been, and will never be a victimless crime. But the consequences of corruption are especially devastating in a country where endemic corruption, brutal repression converge with dramatic consequences. And that is what we have today in Equatorial Guinea, and that's what Rupert has so beautifully described. In the early 1990s, corporations from the United States discovered oil in Equatorial Guinea. Billions of dollars transformed it from an impoverished country to the so-called Kuwait of Africa, Saudi Arabia. Yet, as Rupert mentioned, 3/4 of the people live in destitute poverty, surviving with less than $2 a day. And those might seem like numbers, but those are actual human beings. Those are my nieces, my nephews, my neighbors, people that I know very dearly. The wealth remains concentrated in one family, and one family only. In 2004, the US Senate found that executives from a Washington, D.C. bank, Riggs Bank, helped divert over $700 million from state accounts into offshore shell companies owned, controlled by the president of my country. And in 2010, the Senate concluded that US lawyers, US bankers, US accountants helped the vice president of my country, who is also the son of the president, move over $100 million of illicit funds into the United States to purchase the Malibu mansion and the jets and the Lamborghinis and the largest collection of Michael Jackson memorabilia, the gloves, the jackets, and everything else. All these things are in Malabo, in the capital city of my country. But I attended the hearing in 2010 in the US Congress, and this was my very first time in the US Congress. And I watched, baffled, as the US lawyers and accountants and bankers who have helped laundered millions of dollars pleaded the fifth and walked out of the room completely unblemished. So this is the equivalent of driving the car to the bank, waiting for the thieves. The thieves come back, you pick them up, and you take the cash and the thieves and drive away. So it is no joke when some of us say that Equatorial Guinea is a mafia state. Equatorial Guinea is a criminal state. Since these events in the US, France, as Rupert mentioned, Switzerland, Brazil, South Africa, all have found that the vice president of my country, with the help of Western professional enablers, stole over $500 million to support his lavish lifestyle. Now, exposing this criminality of these authoritarian kleptocrats in my country often feels like an uphill climb. Accountability, for those of us that work on these issues, can sometimes seem elusive. But there are some glimmers of hope. And just last year, we submitted a request to the US Treasury asking for global Magnitsky sanctions to be imposed on the vice president of my country for his direct involvement in corruption. The US has not yet acted, but as some of you know, in July this year, the UK's government took the bold step of sanctioning the vice president of my country for global corruption. Just last week, along with the Clooney Foundation for Justice, we submitted a complaint to the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detentions, requesting urgent remedies on behalf of 6 individuals who are currently arbitrarily detained, tortured, and deprived of fundamental due process rights. Now, I could not and I do not fight corruption and injustice alone. I cannot return home. And that's because the president of my country has labeled me a traitor and an enemy of the state. At the beginning of this year, the president of my country has accused me of being financed by George Soros and ExxonMobil to overthrow his regime. In case you're wondering, if you're wondering, that's not true. All right? But these accusations in my country would most certainly subject me to torture, sham trials, and certain death in prison. So my work is only possible because I work alongside a handful of courageous lawyers, activists, who every single day risk their lives standing up to a venally corrupt and criminal enterprise posing as a government. So I accept this award today in recognition of my collaborators' courage, in recognition of their commitment to justice and accountability. And more importantly, because of the amazing people I have met in this room today, I accept this award with an abiding faith in our collective ability to expose, to otherwise find ways to hold accountable all those enablers, to find ways to hold accountable all those authoritarian kleptocrats in Equatorial Guinea, throughout Africa, and around the world. So thank you very much. Thank you.
The next award this evening is for the Outstanding Investigative Journalist, and to present it, a journalist who is herself a prize-winning historian, a staff writer for The Atlantic, where she's currently doing astonishingly good work, a senior fellow at the SNF Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins University, where she co-leads a project on 21st century disinformation and co-teaches a course on democracy. I should add, we're running quite short of time, so I'm cutting the biographies down to one random paragraph now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Anne Applebaum.
For hundreds of millions of people, the fall of the Berlin Wall was a great moment of triumph. It was a moment that marked the end of hated dictatorships and the beginning of a better era. But for one particular KGB officer stationed in Dresden in that year, the political revolutions of 1989 marked the beginning of an era of personal humiliation. In interviews, Vladimir Putin has often returned to that moment, always describing it as a turning point in his life. But Putin's mournful depiction of his last days in Dresden, scenes of the KGB burning papers, of making fruitless calls for resources and help, these depictions capture only a part of what happened. As Catherine Belton has shown us in her spectacular book, Putin's People, and in so much reporting that she's done over the years for the Financial Times, for Reuters, and others, large chunks have long been missing from this story and from the story of Putin's KGB colleagues, the other members of what would become, 2 decades later, Russia's ruling class. Belton showed us that the KGB was already beginning to prepare for the fall of the Soviet Empire before it happened. In the 1980s, the KGB had already begun setting up the offshore accounts, the fake businesses, the hidden black cash funds that would, in the 1990s, propel some of its members to great wealth and power. The team in Dresden were already using this money to do deals with the world's terrorists as well, including some who induced violence in Germany that year. But Catherine's book, which has now, I believe, become the definitive account of the rise of Putin and Putinism, adds enough new details to establish beyond doubt that the future Russian president was working alongside the people who set up the secret bank accounts and held the meetings with subversives and terrorists. More importantly, she established how, years later, these kinds of projects came to benefit him and to shape his worldview. Her material, which came from interviews that she conducted over many years with former KGB operatives, with Kremlin insiders, with bankers in various countries, added an enormous amount to the existing record and should fundamentally change how we remember the 1990s. It was not, in fact, an era of reform, of Western advisors, of challenges to that reform process. That wasn't the main story of that year, of those years, even though that was what we mostly read in our newspapers. In fact, this was an era when the old Soviet security services launched a revanchist project to take back control, a project that succeeded in making many of them wealthy beyond their dreams, and impoverishing the rest of us in ways that we don't even know. As many of you will know, Catherine has paid a very high price for this brave and important book. She's now being sued here in London by a host of Russian oligarchs. I believe there are 5 separate lawsuits, including one coming from the Kremlin-created company Rosneft. These are men who regularly abuse British courts, taking advantage of British libel laws in order to cover up their crimes, and more importantly, to scare other people away from writing them. As many of you know, this is a subset of a larger problem, the way in which Russian oligarchs, and indeed so many other oligarchs, also abuse British company law, British property law, to launder their wealth and to keep it here, sometimes in the form of flats and houses that are not very far from where we are sitting right now. Human misery, theft, corruption, remade into the form of a Mayfair flat or a Kensington house, not very far from here. Catherine's book and her fight against these unfair lawsuits is part of a larger struggle against a global plague that truly affects us all. This is the plague that Bill Browder has been fighting against also now for many years, as well as so many of the other people in this room, perhaps even most people in this room. This is the plague of international kleptocracy, an elite that steals money, hides money, distorts our economies, and then tries to intimidate anyone who dares to expose them. The members of the Russian elite are particularly guilty. They have once again created a calcified authoritarian political system in Russia, one which Catherine Belton has done so much to describe and expose, as well as a corrupt economy that discourages innovation and entrepreneurship. So instead of experiencing the prosperity and political dynamism that still seemed possible in the 1990s, Russia is once again impoverished and apathetic. But Putin and his people, as Catherine has explained to us, are thriving. And of course, that was the most important goal all along. So for her bravery and her courage in continuing to expose them, even at a great high personal cost, Catherine Belton truly deserves this award. Thank you, Bill, for organizing this event and for creating the context in which giving an award to someone as deserving as this is possible. Catherine, thank you for your work, and may it continue.
Thank you. It's really a very great honor to receive this award this evening, to be in such company honoring the memory of Sergei Magnitsky. It's really an honor, especially when there are so many journalists under fire right now, especially my colleagues in Russia who have written so many groundbreaking stories in the past year, which have lifted the lid on some of Putin's deepest secrets, including how his son-in-law at the time managed to acquire a $380 million stake in one of Russia's biggest petrochemicals giants for only $100. They've also exposed how a woman who had a child that looked suspiciously like Putin somehow suddenly gained a significant stake in Bank Russia, the personal bank for Putin's inner circle. It's an even greater honor given the environment in which they've been operating. The journalists who cracked these stories in Moscow this year have had their homes raided, they've been hauled in for questioning and face criminal investigations. Their phones and other equipment have been seized. Many have been forced to flee. I met just this week a veteran Russian journalist who led the way in Russia's post-perestroika journalism of the 90s and was privy to some of the regime's deepest secrets. She was close to those who surrounded Putin as he rose to power. Her story has never been told, and she doesn't want me to disclose her name now. She's been living in exile outside Russia for most of Putin's time in power, and it turns out for good reason. One time, when she did briefly return to Russia, she was savagely beaten at 3 a.m. just near her home. It took her a year to recover. Later, her grown-up son, who was living very briefly over there, was kidnapped. Later, he was released, but still she has panic attacks. Still, even outside Russia, she's always looking over her shoulder. Amid such repression, I should probably count myself lucky we're only facing a barrage of lawsuits. As you know, almost a year after publication of Putin's People, Roman Abramovich announced he was suing me and HarperCollins for defamation. He was swiftly followed by 3 other Russian tycoons, and then Rosneft, the Kremlin oil giant. Experienced media lawyers say they've never seen a legal onslaught of such scale and intensity. 3 of these tycoons have thankfully by now bowed out, but Abramovich and Rosneft remain. We still don't know what's precisely behind it all. The claims came shortly after Alexei Navalny, the Russian opposition leader, quoted from Putin's People in his video about Putin's $1 billion palace on the Black Sea. We don't know if this is a coincidence, but unfortunately, the cases have had far wider reverberations. There's been an immediate chilling effect on those pursuing Russia-connected public interest journalism in the UK. And I'm far from the only journalists facing such lawsuits. There are a growing number of journalists now who are facing so-called slap lawsuits, where deep-pocketed oligarchs or kleptocrats are trying to pursue, outspend, or intimidate journalists into censoring themselves. And really, hopefully now, UK Parliament is going to wake up and try and introduce legislation which will change this state. But I'd like to dedicate this prize, after everything, though, to all my Russian colleagues, many of whom have inspired and helped me along the way, to the 4 brave Romans of Russian journalism, Roman Shleinov, Roman Arnev, both of iStories, who cracked the story on the secret stake in Sibor, the petrochemicals giant, Roman Badanin of Projekt, who cracked the story of Putin's secret daughter, and Roman Dobrokhotov of Insider, who has worked very closely with Bellingcat to track down those who poisoned Vladimir Kara-Murza and Alexei Navalny. These are the ones who've led the way in recent years, and they are certainly the ones who are bearing the brunt of the Kremlin's repressive tactics this year. For myself, though, I'd like to thank the sources who were brave enough to speak with me and share their insights into how the Putin regime works. I'd like to thank, most of all, my editors, William Collins in the UK, Arabella Pike, and Alex Starr of Farrar, Straus and Giroux in the US for their staunch and unflinching defense of the book. I'd like to thank, too, the fantastic legal team which is standing strongly behind me, and my editors at Reuters, who, despite all this, are still sticking through with me. And most of all, too, I'd like to thank David Hoffman, the Washington Post journalist who inspired me to write this book in the first place, and without whose wise counsel and constant encouragement, I would never have been able to write, let alone finish this book. And also the close friends and my parents who supported me every step of the way, even when I was entering the 7th year of writing it. Thank you.
And now to present the award for Outstanding Human Rights Activist, I will invite Nusrat Ghani to the stage. Nusrat is the MP, a British MP for Wilden, a former Transport Minister and now Vice Chair of the influential 1922 Committee in the Conservative Party. Here, she has led an inquiry on supply chain transparency, which exposed slave labour in UK value chains and the data harvesting of British consumers. For this, she was sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party in March of this year, the only woman in Parliament who was, in an unprecedented move by the CCP, to intimidate British MPs. And Nusrat is here to present the Magnitsky Award for Outstanding Human Rights Activist.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Bill for inviting me this evening to recognise the bravery of so many people. If I can just take a moment, I want to say thank you to all the Uyghur survivors and the Uyghur activists who are giving their testimonies to us and many governments around the world, time again and again and again, to expose the genocide that is taking place against their people. An 85% drop in birth rate amongst Uyghur women down to the forced sterilisation. Hundreds of thousands of Uyghur children are removed from their parents by the Chinese state to wash their brains clean from their Uyghur language, their Uyghur identity and their faith. And of course, millions of Uyghur men and women incarcerated. And before they end their lives or before they are destroyed, they end up producing products which end up on our shelves here in the UK and around the world, all tainted by Uyghur slave blood, and many companies continue to make the profit on the back of that, so we mustn't forget the cause. I want to say thank you to IPAC, who are here today, and Luke de Pulford for all the work that he has done. The work that I do in Parliament is also takes place in the House of Lords, and I can see Seren, I can see Helena Kennedy, I can see Lord Alton, I can see Stephen here as well, and Luke de Pulford, so it's a cross-party effort, and we will continue to do as much work as we can here in the UK. But I am here to present an award to a very brave man, to Peter Darling. This award is for the Outstanding Human Rights Activist 2021. Peter was the co-founder and director of the Chinese Urgent Action Working Group, China Action, very small term for that there. China Action provided assistance to uncertified barefoot lawyers who provide legal aid in rural areas to people who needed it most. Peter was based out in Beijing from 2009 to 2016. But he came under huge pressure. China Action was coming under pressure from the Chinese government, and on the 4th of January 2016, Peter was arrested by the Chinese authorities as he was about to leave the country via Hong Kong. He was held in a black prison in Beijing, and during this time he was deprived of sleep and questioned with a communication enhancement machine. He was denied any access to any support, any ability to exercise, and he was put in a suicide-proof room. Peter spent 23 days in this black prison and later appeared on Chinese state television. And what many of us who understand this will accept that it was a forced confession, but of course the Chinese wanted to point out that he was hurting their state and their people. But he didn't lose his resolve, and he continued to campaign. And then, on his departure from China, he relaunched China Action as a new project, Safeguard Defenders, and the organisation has carried on doing fantastic work, supporting the survival of civil society and human rights. And Peter, remarkably, has managed to get the CGTN Chinese state media channel banned in the UK. And many of you might have heard about this channel because recently it published a fake email from the disappeared tennis player Peng Shuai, and he's done huge work in getting that channel banned, and he's continued to be incredibly brave considering the amount of abuse and torture that he has suffered. So can I please ask onto the stage Peter Darling.
Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to me. For roughly 10 years, I was living in Beijing, and to be able to run an NGO in Beijing, you require complete anonymity. You have to hide. I lived with an assumed name. My friends did not really know what I was doing. And I was quite well suited for it because I think my worst dread is probably public speaking. So hiding in the shadows fitted me like a fish in water. We often think about China as a closed society, a society where it's impossible to operate, but through our work, we've trained some 3,000 lawyers. We've launched over 1,000 public interest litigation lawsuits. We provided an undisclosed amount of support to human rights defenders in need of legal aid, torture rehabilitation, financial aid, and we've collected some of the most cutting edge and frankly remarkable research materials on what's happening in China. So that shows clearly that it is possible to continue to work in a place like China, even though it requires special considerations. To achieve all of this, I have roughly 30 staff and local partners who have either been imprisoned or simply disappeared. They have all one thing in common: they've been tortured in possibly every conceivable way, and not just disappeared for a day or two. The co-founder of my original NGO was missing for 4 years, and the list of torture that he has gone through is quite remarkable. So it comes at a cost, certainly. I myself was made a star briefly for roughly 600 million people on Chinese TV after I was held at a secret prison. A new type of imprisonment instituted under Xi Jinping, which is expanding rapidly, that is a form of enforced disappearance, where people are kept incommunicado. And we're not talking about 2 or 3 people or 200 or 300, we're talking about tens upon tens of thousands. The last year, it expanded by roughly 200%, and it's spreading like wildfire. After that, and after seeing a great many other people put on TV as tools of political terror, we decided to launch a campaign against CGTN, the English language Chinese state television, and CCTV, their parent company. With 14,000 staff, it is the largest media organization in the world. These televised confessions tend to occur not just before trial, but before even formal arrest. Most people are tortured for 2, 3, up to 6 months before they agree. Some of them refuse, like for example, lawyer Wang Yu, and instead they took in her son, and tortured him on camera and then showed it to her, and only then did she agree to make one of these scripted, forced televised confessions. Now, we're involved in a great many campaigns, and like many human rights NGOs, we try to raise awareness about the issues and raise the political cost of perpetrating these violations. But with this particular campaign, we managed something quite unique. We managed to stop the violation. There are no more forced televised confessions coming out of China. There are no more forced televised confessions of lawyers and journalists in China. The reason we managed to achieve this is that we realized there was a point of leverage, and this is something that can be hard to find in a campaign. We knew that Chinese television, more than anything, wants to have an international TV channel for soft propaganda. And if they were put between a choice between having that and airing these forced televised confessions, we knew what they would choose. And instead of going the political route, we decided to launch complaints in a great many countries under local TV regulations. And of course, here in the UK, it led to them being taken off the air. They've also been taken off the air in Norway, in Sweden, in Australia. Last week, the Senate and congressional leadership in the US Congress has approached the FCC, the Ofcom of the United States, to launch a full investigation. There are investigations ongoing in France and in Canada. So we certainly are hoping to exact more damages to the TV station to make sure they do not resume this practice. But already at this point, we have stopped it. And for all the campaigns we're involved in, I think that's our proudest moment. And one man who's actually made all of this possible is sitting right there, Simon Chung from Hong Kong. His was the last... his was the last confession that they dared to air internationally and in China, and it was the nail in their own coffin. A coffin largely built together with another British person who is not here tonight, Peter Humphrey, a former journalist who was almost brought to death in a Shanghai detention center. So along the way, we've had a lot of help from a lot of victims, including in China, who have been willing to speak out about this, despite the fact that they could disappear yet again just for speaking out. So it's been quite a ride, and we have barely even begun. So thank you, and again, like everyone else, Bill, not thank you for tonight, not thank you for me standing up here, but rather the fact that you started this just 6-7 years ago, and you managed to create the November tradition in just a few years. It's inspiring, to say the least. So thank you, everyone.
The final award of the evening is the Magnitsky Award for Outstanding Opposition Figure. And to present it, Vladimir Kara-Murza, a Russian politician, author, historian and journalist, a long-time colleague of the opposition leader Boris Nemtsov. Vladimir was a candidate for the Russian parliament and served as deputy leader of the People's Freedom Party. Twice, in 2015 and 2017, he was poisoned and left in a coma. A subsequent media investigation by Bellingcat and the Insider has identified officers from Russia's Federal Security Service as being behind the poisonings. He's now a senior advisor at Human Rights First and a senior fellow at the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. He's also, or has been, a visiting fellow at the University of Chicago, leading a seminar course on contemporary Russia. He also, by dint of his international travel, is probably the only person in the room who's been vaccinated both with the Sputnik vaccine in Russia and with the Pfizer vaccine in Europe. So he's quite possibly the most immunized person in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Vladimir Kara-Murza.
Thank you. Thank you so much, James. And you know, it's definitely safe to shake my hand. Thank you so much to Bill Browder and the Magnitsky Justice Campaign for making this award evening an annual November tradition. And thank you above all, I think I speak on behalf of many people in this room, for finding a way, even in these crazy times, to bring us together. I think what we missed most of all over these past 18 months has been seeing the faces of our friends. And it's good to see so many here this evening. Since 1973, Freedom House has published its annual Freedom in the World Index, ranking countries according to their respect for political liberties and civil rights. If one looked at the map of Europe, say 35 years ago, nothing by historical standards, half of the continent would be marked in purple, not free. The progress since that time has been astounding, and today there are only 2 dictatorships, 2 purple-marked countries left on the map of Europe. But they are, of course, the 2 countries that are closest to the hearts of many people in this room. My own country, Russia, and the country of our next award recipient, the Republic of Belarus. Vladimir Putin and Alexander Lukashenko, Europe's last 2 dictators. They reportedly hate each other on a personal basis, but their regimes feed off each other, learn from each other, support each other, and parrot each other in their practices of repression. Murder, torture, wrongful imprisonment have become routine in these regimes' treatment of their opponents and their societies. But despite the horrendous repression, there are people both in Russia and in Belarus who are willing to stand up for what they believe in, to stand up for the dignity and freedom of their fellow citizens, despite the dangers, despite the risks, despite the cost. One of them is Maria Kolesnikova. A professional musician, a virtuosa flute player, she had never been involved in politics until last year, when she simply could not stand aside. As campaign manager for imprisoned opposition leader Viktor Babariko, and later as co-chair of the campaign for unified opposition presidential candidate Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, Maria became one of the faces of the movement for change. This sign she would make with her hands at rallies and meetings across the country, a sign of love, a sign of hope, would come to symbolize civic resistance to dictatorship. And when the Lukashenko regime wanted to forcibly throw her out of the country, literally driving her to the Ukrainian border post and trying to push her across, she tore her own passport, choosing to remain alongside her people, even if that meant unjust imprisonment. In Maria's case, the sentence was 11 years. The protests in Belarus may have been quashed for now, but the movement they have unleashed is not going anywhere. And speaking as a historian in my former life, I know that there will come a day when all of Europe on that Freedom House map is purple-free. And when that day comes, it will be because of people like Maria Kolesnikova. It is my distinct honor to present the 2021 Magnitsky Award for Outstanding Opposition Figure to Maria Kolesnikova of the Republic of Belarus, and to accept the recognition, I would like to call on the stage Natalia Kalida of the Free Belarus Theatre, the recipients of last year's Magnitsky Award for Courage Under Fire. Natalia.
Thank you, Vladimir. It's a great pleasure to get this award from Masha, from you especially. You know very well what it means to fight with dictators. The only thing that I will probably argue a bit with you in terms of two dictators, and it's two last dictators of Europe, we continue to insist that this is the last dictator of Europe in Belarus, and Putin is dictator of Eurasia. The only. But we will go into historian conversation later about that. I would like to begin by reading a short message from Maria. It was possible to get that message out of jail. We've been working on it for months. It's a very short one. And then she asked me to add a couple of words. But as Eastern Europeans, we don't do a couple of words. We know that we ran out of time. We know the closing building is coming very soon, but we'll do it anyway. So message from Maria. I would like to share this Magnitsky Award with my friends, with Belarusians who, like me, are in prison. Together, we are on this difficult path, full of injustice and lawlessness. Yet, we know that human dignity, freedom, and justice are worth the fight. That's Maria. And now a couple of paragraphs from me. For the last 27 years, I hit very similar stages because dictatorship in Belarus is for 27 years. All people who came up today on stage before us, it's possible to combine all their stories and imagine all those numbers and imagine all those tortures and put that into Belarus, because all of it is happening there. And for the past 20 years, I'm talking about the dangers of expanding dictatorship, about the risk of turning a blind eye, and yet we're still here talking about why people like Alexander Pavlovich are more often than not denied visitation rights to this wrongly imprisoned daughter. I'm grateful to Bill Browder, without question, a man who continues to do his absolute best to keep Belarus on agenda, while so many are willing to sweep it under the carpet of the general Russian sphere of influence and undermine Lukashenko's all cruelty towards his people and danger to the world. It is indeed very hard to focus on Belarus as its own entity with both the West and Lukashenko are selling its middle ground, a place to hold Minsk talks or to place for migrants to enter the EU, but not dictatorship. Well, let me make it easy for you. Let me put a name to the country which seems to be so easily overlooked. Alexander Pavlovich Kolesnikov is the father of Maria Kolesnikova, who is being awarded here tonight. And while we get back to her, let's focus on him for a moment. For us, Maria is a resilient woman willing to make huge sacrifice for the freedom of her country. But for him, she is just a little girl, his little girl, who has been held against her will for 8 months in solitary confinement that is recognized by UN as a torture. Silenced by the usurper who stole Belarus from its own people. Belarus is a stolen land from people by dictator. Belarus today is not only a country of heroes willing to fight for justice, it's a country of parents who cry themselves to sleep, not knowing where their children are, who wake up at 6 a.m. to stand up in queues in the hope that their food parcels will be accepted in jail doors, who nurse their children in hospitals after rapes and tortures they went through in jails, who mourn the death of their children in incarceration, and who sadly die themselves, unable to hear the suffering their loved ones underwent. But let's look broader. The parents of brave Belarusians are not the only ones suffering injustice by the hands of the regime. Just yesterday, the parents of 19-year-old Syrian refugee Ahmad al-Hassan found out that their only son drowned at the river Bug on the Polish-Belarusian border. And he has a name, not just numbers of so-called migrants. It's a clear exploitation of refugees and humans that we have at the Polish-Belarusian border. He was forced into the river by Belarusian border control. They made obviously no attempts to save him. In fact, his body was left there and only to be found by Polish divers a few days later. We're talking about a regime where people are expendable. In fact, people are the only commodity of the otherwise resource-poor country. To quote President Václav Havel, who was life patron of Belarus Free Theater, it is with horror how swiftly we are all abandoning position which only yesterday we refused to desert. What social conscience only yesterday regarded as improper is today casually executed. Tomorrow it will eventually be brought natural, and the day after be held as a model of behavior. And so, with all of my heart, and with hearts of all parents whose children are in Belarus jails like Maria, I appeal to you who could make those changes. Don't let this become the model of behavior. Through once again, it's easy to disregard Belarus and consider it a threat only to its own people. With Kremlin involvement and the rise of hybrid warfare, championed by two dictators, the totalitarian regime in Belarus is no longer a threat just to Belarusians. It is a threat to you. It's a threat to democracy and a sheer survival of free word. The wait-and-see approach favored by EU officials can prove itself to be a tipping point in the iron-making of democracy. Alexander Pavlovich could only see his daughter Maria through a prison window. We must break that window in order for families to get reunited, in order for the European continent to be stable. But EU, UK, United States must move from wait to see. Otherwise, hijacking of airplanes, kidnappings of people, tortures and rape will be happening on the money of all those money bags of Lukashenko who drawing their money here in London, in the center of London. It's very easy to have offshore, so you must stop it. Magnitsky is exactly that particular tool where you could act. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce members of our company, of Belarus Free Theatre Ensemble, who went through jail, through tortures, been completely naked and stripped down in jail. They've been infected by COVID because they've been sitting in 20-meter cell with 60 other people, as COVID is used as another lethal weapon by the dictator. But today they're here with us in order to sing a song with a hope, because we could convert hope into dreams, and dreams could become true if we act on them and stop talking, what I will do now.
Could I ask all the, so that's the end of the evening's program. Can I ask all the winners to come up on stage for a last photo opportunity? And to finish off the evening, one of the wonderful things about this evening is, there's no fundraising or any other that kind of stuff. In fact, we actually have a gift for you. My friend Jeffrey Robertson, QC, who's sitting right here, has written a book called Bad People, How to Be Rid of Them, which is all about using the Magnitsky Act to go after the bad guys. And he's signed the book, and we're going to be giving out copies on your way out. So all of you will get nice gift from Jeffrey with his signature, and I thank you all for coming. I know there's been some very sad stories, but it's also very uplifting for all of us to be here together to share those stories and share in the hope of justice for everybody here. Thank you very much for coming. Hello, hello, hello. The award winners, please come up here so we can get a picture. Award winners, please come up here.
I'm just going to move this a little bit to the side.
Thank you.